I was smiling the whole drive up. 3 hours with the windows down, coffee going cold in the cup holder, my favorite playlist on shuffle. I had taken the day off work. Actually taken it off, no pager, no on-call, nothing. And I was singing along to a song I only half knew the words to. I was happy, really, genuinely happy. When I pulled into the driveway, my mom was standing on the porch with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though it was 72 degrees. She wasn't crying yet, but her eyes were already red. I got out of the car still smiling. It took me a second to read her face, and then the smile fell. Let me back up. I'm a 31-year-old physical therapist working at a hospital in Charlotte. I've been doing it for 6 years, and I love it. The work is hard and the hours are long, but there's something about watching someone take their first steps after a knee replacement, or seeing an 80-year-old woman squeeze a stress ball for the first time since her stroke. That makes everything worth it. I don't make the kind of money that gets written about in magazines, but I'm careful with what I have. I max out my 401k. I don't carry credit card debt. I brown bag my lunch most days. My parents have been married for 48 years. My dad worked 30 years at a paper mill in eastern Tennessee, retired at 62 with a pension that was smaller than he expected after the company restructured. My mom did bookkeeping part-time at a local church for most of my childhood and stopped when my dad retired so they could travel. They'd always talked about traveling, the Grand Canyon, a cruise to Alaska, a little cabin somewhere up in the mountains. They never quite got there. Something always came up. I have one sibling. My brother is 4 years older than me. He married his wife about 9 years ago, and from almost the beginning, there was a pattern I kept telling myself I was imagining. They'd call when the car needed work. They'd show up at my parents' house for a visit that stretched into 2 weeks. They'd ask my dad to co-sign something, or ask my mom to watch the kids for a month while they sorted some things out. My parents always said yes. They always looked a little more tired afterward. And when I brought it up, my mom would say, "That's just how family works, honey," in a tone that meant she didn't want to discuss it. My brother and his wife have 2 kids. They rent a house about 40 minutes from my parents. He works inconsistently. He's been in and out of HVAC work, sales, a few things he's got going on. She doesn't work. I've never once heard a solid explanation of how they pay their bills. But I've noticed that my parents' savings account has been quietly going in one direction. I found out how far things had gone about 8 months ago. My dad called me on a Sunday, which he almost never does. He's a texter now, emojis and all. And he sounded different on the phone, quieter. He told me they'd had to dip into their emergency fund to cover the property taxes on the house, that the HVAC system had gone out, that they were fine, just wanted me to know, nothing to worry about. I called my mom after. She filled in the parts my dad had left out. My brother had borrowed $9,000 over the past 2 years, not all at once. 1,000 here, 1,500 there, always for something urgent. The kids' medical bills, a gap in rent, the transmission on the truck. My parents had never said no, and my brother had never paid any of it back. I sat with that for a long time. I'm not someone who makes big decisions quickly. I'm the kind of person who researches a vacuum cleaner for 3 weeks before buying it. But something settled in me that day, a quiet kind of certainty, and over the next few months I made a plan. My parents had always rented. They'd never owned a home. They'd moved around when my dad was younger, following work, and by the time they settled in Tennessee, buying just never seemed to be the right time. They lived in a nice enough rental, a 2-bedroom house on a quiet street. But the landlord had raised the rent twice in the past 3 years, and my dad hated not having a yard he could plant things in. I had been saving for a house of my own. I had a little over $40,000 set aside. Plus, I had some investments I could liquidate without too much pain. I looked at what houses were actually selling for in their county, talked to a real estate agent my coworker had used, and ran the numbers until I found something that worked. It was a 3-bedroom ranch house about 6 miles from where they were renting. Small yard, big enough for a garden. New roof 2 years ago. Central air. A little sunroom off the back that my mom would absolutely love. It listed at $260,000. I offered $255 and they took it. I paid cash. or close enough to it. I used my savings, liquidated the investments, and took a small personal loan for the remaining amount I needed to bridge the gap. The monthly payment on the loan was manageable. Tight, but manageable. I'd done the math 100 times. I did not tell my parents. I told my brother even less, obviously. He didn't know anything. As far as he was aware, I was just making my regular visits every couple of months, bringing food my mom liked, fixing things around the rental that had been broken too long. The plan was this: I would close on the house, get the keys, do a small amount of work to make it feel like theirs before they walked in. A few plants, some things from catalogs my mom had dog-eared and left around. A bird feeder for my dad, who has watched birds from every window he's ever had. And then I would drive them over on a Saturday morning in October and hand them the deed. I had imagined this moment probably 200 times. My dad's face when I told him the garden was his. My mom touching the door of the sunroom. The way my dad would try not to cry and fail. I closed on the house in September. I spent the next 2 weekends making it ready. I painted the front door a deep green because my mom had once pointed at a door that color on a walk and said she'd always wanted a door like that. I put the bird feeder in the backyard by the big oak tree. I bought a small kitchen table. Nothing fancy, just something warm and solid, because the dining set they had was falling apart. I drove up on the third Saturday in October. The whole way there I was singing. When I turned onto my parents' street and saw my brother's truck in the driveway, I thought nothing of it. He stopped by sometimes. Okay, fine. When I parked and walked up and saw my mom standing on the porch with her arms around herself, I thought maybe someone was sick, maybe some news had come in. I ran through the list of relatives in my head. The older ones, the ones we worried about. "Mom," I said, "what's wrong?" She looked at me and her face did something complicated. Like she was trying to figure out which version of the truth to tell me. "Your brother's inside," she said. Okay. I looked past her through the screen door. I could hear voices. His and his wife's and what sounded like my dad's. Lower and slower than the other two. "What's going on?" She finally said it. "They found out about the house." I went very still. "How?" She closed her eyes. "I told your aunt she must have said something." Inside, my brother was standing in the middle of my parents' living room with his hands on his hips, the way he stands when he's decided he's right about something. His wife was on the couch. My dad was in his chair, and he looked the way he looks when he's had a long day and just wants it to be over. My brother looked at me when I walked in. He did a half laugh, the kind that's not really a laugh. "There she is," he said. "Hey," I said. "So you bought them a house?" "I did. And you didn't say anything to me." I looked at him for a moment. "I didn't realize I needed your permission." His wife made a sound from the couch, a small, dismissive exhale. "It's not about permission," she said. "It's about family. We're family too." "I know you are," I said. "How are the kids?" She didn't answer. My brother stepped forward. Not aggressively, but in the way people do when they want you to know they're making an effort to stay calm. "We've been struggling," he said. "You know that. You know what we've been dealing with. And you had, apparently, enough money to buy a house, and you couldn't even—" "Enough," my dad said. My brother stopped. My dad didn't say it loudly. He almost never raises his voice. But there's a quality to it when he's serious, something flat and certain, and it stops conversations. "She didn't ask us for anything," my dad said. "She did something for us. That's the end of it." My brother looked at him. His jaw moved. "Dad." I said, "That's the end of it." The room was quiet for a moment. Then my brother turned to me. "And here's the part I didn't see coming. Here's the part I should have anticipated but didn't, because even after everything, I keep expecting people to surprise me in better ways." He said, "We need help with rent." Just like that, not a pause, not a transition. We'd gone from, "How could you not include me?" to "We need money in under 2 minutes. I looked at him for a long time. "How much are you behind?" I asked. 2 months. That was $3,200. I knew because I knew their rent. I had heard my mom mention it. His wife was watching me with an expression that was not quite a request and not quite a demand. It lived somewhere in between, in a way I recognized. It was the expression that had always gotten my parents to say yes. It made you feel like the refusal was the cruel act, not the ask. I thought about the personal loan I'd taken out, the way I'd reorganized my budget for the next 3 years, the emergency fund I'd cut in half to make the house work. No, I said. His wife blinked. My brother's face did something I couldn't quite name. Surprise, maybe. Or the thing that looks like surprise but is actually just the moment when the old script stops working. What? I'm not going to help with rent, I said. I love you, I love your kids. But I've been stretched thin doing this. I gestured vaguely at everything, the situation, the months of planning, the financial weight I'd been carrying quietly, and I don't have it right now. And also, honestly, I think you need to work this out. We can't just. You've borrowed $9,000 from mom and dad in the last 2 years, I said. I know about it. They didn't tell me because they were embarrassed, but I know. The room got very quiet. My brother looked at my dad. My dad looked at his hands. That was different situations, my brother said. I know it felt that way each time. His wife stood up from the couch. You know what your problem is? She said. You've always thought you were better than us. You went to school, you got your little career. Cassidy, my brother put a hand on her arm. She stopped. I noticed she'd used a different name in the moment, not my name. She'd been working up to something, and it came out scrambled. That's how angry she was. I don't think I'm better than you, I said. I think I made different choices, and I think some of those choices were hard. And I think you've been making it harder for my parents for a long time, and I love you too much to keep pretending that's not true. Nobody said anything. My brother stood there for a moment, and then, slowly, something went out of his posture. Not defeat, exactly. More like a man who has been holding a position for a long time and finally lets himself sit down. We don't have anywhere to go if we lose the place, he said. Quiet now. No performance in it. Call 211, I said. It's a social services line. They'll connect you with rental assistance programs. There are options. But it can't keep coming from here. I looked at my parents. My mom was in the doorway now. They're going to need to stop being the option. My dad nodded, once, slow. My brother looked at my dad. Something passed between them that I couldn't read. Something old and tired and sad. The way things get in families that have been close and complicated for a long time. Okay, my brother said. His wife gathered her bag. She didn't look at me. They said goodbye to my parents with a flatness that I think was the result of not knowing yet what they felt. The door closed. The truck backed out of the driveway. And then it was just the 3 of us. My mom let out a breath so long I thought she'd been holding it for months. My dad got up from his chair. He looked out the window at the yard. Their yard, the one they were renting, the grass a little overgrown because the landlord wouldn't fix the mower, and my dad's back had been acting up. So, he said, this house. You want to go see it? I said. He looked at my mom. She had started to cry finally, the quiet kind, not upset but relieved. The crying you do when something you didn't know you needed finally arrives. Yeah, he said. I want to go see it. We drove over with the windows down. It was one of those October days in Tennessee that feels borrowed from summer, warm and golden, the leaves just starting to think about changing. My dad rode in the front. My mom was in the back. Nobody talked much. There wasn't much to say. I turned onto the street and he saw it before I said anything. The green door. He didn't say anything, but he made a sound in his chest, low and involuntary, the way people sound when something catches them off guard. I parked in the driveway and handed him the key. He held it for a moment, just looked at it. It's in your names, I said. Both of you. It's yours. My mom was already out of the car. She was standing on the grass with her hand over her mouth. She was looking at the sunroom. My dad unlocked the front door. His hands were steady. He pushed it open and stood there in the doorway for a second, looking in. The afternoon light was coming through the windows at a low angle, laying itself across the kitchen floor in long, pale rectangles. He stepped inside. I waited on the porch. I didn't need to go in yet. I just stood there and listened to the sound of them moving through the rooms. My dad's footsteps, my mom's voice saying something I couldn't quite hear, and then both of them quiet. Through the back window I could see the bird feeder. The yard was still. The oak tree was enormous and old, and the kind of permanent that makes you understand why people plant things. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that the light shifted. Eventually my dad came back to the door. His face was different. Not just emotional, something deeper. Like a man who has set something down that he'd been carrying for so long he'd stopped noticing the weight. "The garden," he said. "All yours," I said. He nodded. He reached out and put one hand on my shoulder and squeezed once. That was all. My dad is not a man of many gestures, and so the ones he makes you remember. We stayed until the sun went down. We ordered pizza from a place nearby and sat in the empty living room on camping chairs I'd left there for this purpose, eating off paper plates, talking about nothing important. What color to paint the second bedroom, whether the oak would drop too many leaves in fall, if the sunroom got enough light for tomatoes in winter. At some point I looked at my mom and she was looking around the room like she was trying to memorize it. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking about curtains," she said. And I laughed. I laughed until my eyes watered, and then my dad laughed too, and my mom looked at both of us like we were a little ridiculous, which we probably were. The drive home was dark and quiet. I had the windows up this time, the heat on low, the radio off. I was tired in the good way, the kind that lives in your bones, not your head. I thought about my brother, about what came next for him and his family, and whether the conversation we'd had would hold. Or whether 3 months from now there'd be another call, another emergency, another amount. I didn't know. I still don't. I can't make choices for him. I can only be honest about what I'm willing to do and hold that line without apology. What I do know is this: my parents went to sleep that night in a house that belonged to them. A house no landlord could raise the rent on. A house with a green door and a bird feeder and a sunroom that caught the morning light. My dad sent me a text at 9:30. Just a photo. The view from the back window, the yard in the dark, the bird feeder visible in the porch light. No caption, just the photo. I stared at it for a long time before I put my phone down and turned off the light. Some things don't need a caption. I keep coming back to the moment my dad held that key. He didn't say anything at first. He just turned it over in his hand like he was making sure it was real. And I thought about how many times in my life I had watched my parents absorb something hard. A rent hike, a broken appliance they couldn't afford to fix, a phone call from my brother that left my mom quiet for the rest of the day. And just keep going. No dramatics, no blame, just keep going. That's what integrity looks like when nobody's watching. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, year after year, in the small decisions. The bill paid on time, the money not borrowed, the quiet life built without asking someone else to carry the weight. I'm not going to pretend I had it all figured out. When I started saving for that house, I wasn't thinking in terms of cause and effect or some larger principle about how life works. I was just a woman with a spreadsheet and a feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away. But looking back, I think the path I walked, the discipline, the planning, the years of brown bag lunches and skipped vacations, that was its own kind of answer. Not to my brother, not to anyone watching, just to myself. There's something I've had to learn the hard way about the difference between being kind and being useful. My parents thought they were being kind when they said yes every time my brother called, and they were coming from love. But love without discernment can hollow people out over time. $9,000. 2 months behind on rent, none of it landing anywhere that changed anything. I said no that day not because I didn't care, but because I'd finally developed enough clarity to understand that saying yes would have been the easier thing for me, not the better thing for him. Saying yes would have let me avoid the discomfort of his face when I refused. It would have let me walk out of that room feeling generous, instead of having to sit with the possibility that he was angry at me, maybe for a long time. That kind of no takes something out of you, but I think it was the most honest thing I could have offered. What strikes me most when I sit with the whole story is how the choices compounded in both directions. Every small, responsible decision I made built towards something I couldn't fully see yet. And every time my brother let urgency override accountability, it narrowed what was possible for him. Not his punishment, just his result. That's how it works. The math doesn't care about intentions. My dad planted garlic that November. He sent me a photo. Just the turned soil, the little paper marker sticking up, the afternoon light low and flat the way it gets in Tennessee in late fall. No caption. I think about that photo when things get hard. When I'm tired, or the work feels thankless, or I catch myself wondering if the sacrifices were worth it. They were. They always were. The garlic came up in spring.